The first comic book I ever owned was an issue of The Incredible Hulk. Instantly, I was hooked and went scouring through the boxes at secondhand bookstores trying to find more. In those boxes, I stumbled across a giant, green-skinned, muscle-bound hero. But it wasn't the Hulk. Erik Larsen's Savage Dragon was unlike anything my innocent 7-year-old eyes had seen before. I called Larsen to find out how his and the dragon's journey in comics began.
Some reason I decided to make my own comics for my own kind of entertainment, and I just drew them for 10 years, starting about age 9. And then when I was 19, Charlton Comics was kind of going out of business, but on their way to going out of business, they decided, hey, let's do a book called Charlton Bullseye, and we will publish any comics that people send in to us. And you can keep the copyright, but you'll get paid no money. By that point, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way was out. So I could look at that as like, this is how comics are done. They're drawn this big, and here's the basics. I'd drawn up this story for Charlton Bullseye, and I submitted it, and the editor wrote back to me and said, well, sales of this book were so low that we had to cancel the book. And so then I had this story that he said, hey, submit it to Marvel at DC. It looks professional to me. And I was like, well, that's encouraging. Me and a couple buddies who I had met through a local comic book store decided, let's print our own comic. My dad was teaching self-reliance workshops, so we had a printing press, and it was a tabletop offset press, paper plates. it was really just barely functioning as a printing press. So when it came to, hey, let's make a comic book, I was like, well, I've got the printer. It's right here. I can do this. There was a convention that was coming up. We wanted to have it done by that day. So we printed up this thing. The ink was fresh as we brought it to that show. And then I put that out, and it went out in the world, and a couple of people who had bought it contacted me and were like, hey, you wanted to work for us for like money? It was, $15 a page, but that was more than I was making. At that point, you just kind of work your way up the food chain. Megaton led to doing stuff over at Americomics, and at that point, I was semi-professional, getting something of a page rate. And then I met Jim Shooter at a convention. He could look through my portfolio, saw that there was a bunch of stuff. He said, how would you like to do something for Marvel Fanfare? It's like, sure. I didn't know that meant, how would you like to do an inventory story? But, that's basically what it meant, was how would you like to do a one-part story that may see print someday or may never see print? I said, why don't we plot it here? And he was like, all right. And so we did. We just went off to the hotel bar and kicked around a very basic outline. And then I went home and drew it. And Jim had his favorite writer scripted it. So Stanley scripted it. And that was my first Marvel job. And from there, I had the greatest samples ever at that point, because it all played right into my strengths. It was just two guys, Thor and the Hulk, just kicking the crap out of each other for 22 pages. Show that to anybody else, like, oh, you're awesome. Come work for me. And then I went from that to doing DN Agents for Mark Evanier over at Eclipse Comics. And then I was given a fill-in on Amazing Spider-Man early on. So that was in the midst of doing that. Somewhere around there, I ran into Mike Gold, and he was kind of championing me to do stuff over at DC. He really wanted me to be the Teen Titans artist. And I did one fill-in issue on Teen Titans, but I never became the regular dude on that. And so when Steve Lytle kind of crashed and burned on the Doom Patrol, they were just looking for a warm body on that. There I was. And so I did Doom Patrol for about a year. As soon as that was out, I was like, I am out of here. Because I always wanted to work at Marvel, and they had offered me The Punisher. So I was like, okay, I'm doing The Punisher. And I jumped on that book, found that was not my cup of tea. I wanted to draw big guys kicking the crap out of each other. And here's a realistic guy with, carefully referenced guns shooting at stuff or fighting ninjas or whatever the hell he was up to, and just, it wasn't what I wanted to do. So when something else came along, I was like, all right, I'm out of here. But Terry Cavanaugh, who was the editor on Marvel Comic Presents, got me an Excalibur serial. Those were some pretty nice looking pages, and I think that's what got me the Spider-Man gig. When I came on the Doom Patrol, I made absolutely zero effort to match the style that Steve Lytle was doing on the book. And fan reaction was not entirely positive. When I came on to Spider-Man, I was like, well, I didn't ease the transition at all last time. And Steve Lytle had something of a following, but Todd McFarlane's got a way bigger following. So I made a little bit of an effort to kind of emulate at least some of the surface qualities to it. So it's like, oh, Todd's giving funky borders around things, I'll do that. And you give him fat webbing, you put him into funky poses, we're good to go. In other interviews, I would give Todd a credit for giving Venom a tongue, because I thought he had. You know, I was reading Spider-Man at the time, so I had all of Todd's issues of Spider-Man. And he had done a cover for, Venom versus Spider-Man or Spider-Man versus Venom or something. And so I saw the cover of it, and his mouth was open, and I was like, oh, he's got a tongue. Todd's giving him a tongue now. I didn't buy it because I was like, I've already got the issues. I'm not going to buy this expensive softcover book just so I can have this cover. In my brain, I was like, he's giving him a tongue now. So I thought, I'll give him an even crazier tongue. And so as time went on, I was like, his tongue got more and more out of control. It wasn't until years later that I saw the book again. I was like, no, you wouldn't give him a tongue at all. He just had an open mouth. You could see that he owned a tongue, but it wasn't like crazy tongue. It was just, there's this little red dot of something in there. He had like crappy memory. It's like, that's what you get. I created some characters that I didn't want to give away to Marvel and DC, especially, the Savage Dragon character, because it's like, I came up with this guy when I was a little kid. So to just be like, hey, you can have him now, enjoy, that's just seemed, that's not going to happen. But I'd also had kind of told myself, if you ever start writing and drawing this guy's adventures, this is going to be the rest of your career. You're just going to be doing this till you're done. So you sure you want to start now?
Larsen would end up being one of the founding fathers of Image Comics, but he wasn't 100% committed to leaving Marvel behind.
With Image, a lot of us weren't all in, and I wasn't all in. I had other work lined up. I had committed to doing a Nova miniseries because Marvel didn't approve it as a regular ongoing book. So they said, okay, you can do a miniseries. So I was like, well, if I'm going to do a miniseries, might as well do something over at this Image Comics thing. And Rob, I think, was thinking he was going to still continue on X-Force somehow. As soon as we announced, Marvel was like, you were the enemy. And they kind of cut off all ties. They're like, oh, I thought I was still there, but I guess I'm not. So I guess I'll do this book for 30 years. I got my first check from my first issue of my first Image book, and I paid off my mortgage to my house. So it was like, this seems like something to keep doing. If I was doing this book at 90, I would consider that a life well lived.
And Larsen's advice for wannabe comic artists?
You gotta make yourself useful. If you're looking at some book and it's constantly different artists doing it, you can go, they're having trouble getting somebody who could do this book on a regular basis. I'm going to do sample pages featuring that character. If you're looking at, I notice on the Hulk they have fill-ins all the time by different artists. I'll draw a 6-page Hulk story to show people that my Hulk is wicked cool, and then, send that to the editor. And then at some point, if they're sitting there going, I need somebody on this. Oh, well, I've seen this 6 pages by whoever this is. Maybe I'll give that kid a break. Show people what you can do. Basically, self-publish your own stuff. Doesn't matter. We're in the World Wide Web now. You can do this stuff easily. You don't even need to be published. You just draw 5 pages and put it up online and say, hey, what do you think of this? Get it out there. Editors always say, hey, don't mail us unsolicited stuff, but they're going to open the mail. They just will. And they're not necessarily going to contact you and say anything one way or the other, but they're going to open their mail. So send them some mail.